I think it's beyond our comprehension, what's potentially available, what's potentially out there.
It is not really new science, it's really faster science.
Even though it has the potential, perhaps, of creating some great good, it also has the potential to create some very large, irreversible harms.
Basically, biotechnology can affect and have impact on anything that is living. So that's quite a remarkable thing.
The possibilities provided by biotechnology are endless, amazing, and controversial. Today, we'll explore more about a powerful form of biotechnology, genetic engineering, which allows us to crack the genetic code and manipulate it in ways we never imagined. We'll look at how it's done, why it's done, and most importantly, whether it should be done. Should we clone animals? Should we clone human beings? Should a gene from a fish find its way into a tomato? All of this and more is possible with genetic engineering. To understand genetic engineering, you have to start with the material it manipulates, genes. Genes are units of inheritance, specific sections of DNA that determine whether you're a dog, a cat, or a corn plant, whether you're a giraffe, a bacteria, or a human being. Whether you have blue eyes or brown, whether you're tall or short, dark or light. Genes control those physical characteristics and more. The powerful packages of information direct all the different processes of life, from fighting a cold to digesting dinner. How do they do all that? It comes down to DNA.
DNA is a set of instructions that have to be followed in the right order in order to make a person or a fly or a worm or something like that.
The instructions are written in a kind of code of A's, T's, G's, and C's. To crack the code, you need to know one basic rule, that A, adenine, always pairs with T, thymine, and that G, guanine, always hooks up with C, cytosine. Those pairs can then be strung together in millions of different combinations, forming specific sequences. Those sequences are genes. Genes provide the instructions, or the blueprints, for building an organism. And every single living organism has its own individual blueprint. That's why genetic engineering is so powerful. Nature provides us with a gene pool that's overflowing with different traits and processes. Genetic engineering gives scientists the power to pick and choose from that pool, then put the genes together to work when and where they want.
There's a lot of this biodiversity out there. Mother Nature has already created really very elegant tools and really elegant processes to already do what we're looking for. So why not tap into that?
Not only can science tap into the power of the gene pool, the power can be maximized through genetic engineering. Genetic engineering changes or manipulates genes in order to achieve specific results, and there are many ways to engineer genetic material. Defective genes can be fixed, missing genes replaced, genes can be copied or cloned, and genes are mixed and matched through recombinant DNA technology.
In recombinant DNA, you can think of it when you have a poster that you put together and you cut and paste little pictures onto the poster. If you just saw the pictures in the magazines that you took them from, they might not tell the story, but if you put them together on a poster a certain way, it tells you a story. Recombinant DNA is taking pieces of DNA and cutting and pasting it together with molecular enzymes that allow DNA molecules actually to be cut apart and then pasted back together in a particular sequence. That recombination ability leads to an incredible amount of new experiments that can lead to knowledge and insight about what the genes do and how they function.
So let's say you have a fish that lives in extremely cold conditions. If you could find the genes that protect the fish from the cold, you could cut and paste them into the genetic code of a tomato plant. The fish genes are now functioning in the tomato plant, giving it the same protection from the cold they gave the fish. The possibilities of this technology are endless, and everyone from medicine to industry is scrambling to adopt it and adapt it to their specific needs. Industries are developing a wide range of uses for genetic engineering, from textiles to healthcare to cleaning products. For instance, some detergents use genetically engineered enzymes to replace harsh chemicals, making the detergent safer for the environment. The blue jeans you're wearing might get their faded finish from a genetically engineered enzyme. Down on the farm, genetic engineering gives crops resistance to pests and diseases, making farmers less dependent on chemicals. Food can be made more flavorful or more nutritious. Would you like apples with genes from oranges, so they'd contain more vitamin C? How about a tomato that keeps its flavor longer and stays fresher? Just like crops, livestock can be genetically engineered. For leaner meat, more flavor, more wool, or more milk. Beyond uses in farming are uses in farming, genetically engineering crops or livestock to produce pharmaceuticals. A glass of milk might be brimming with an antibiotic. Imagine eating a banana engineered to produce a vaccine. No more shots. Some of the most promising and powerful applications of genetic technology are in the field of medicine. Researchers are using it to diagnose and predict diseases, and to develop therapies and drugs to treat devastating diseases like cancer and Alzheimer's, diabetes, and cystic fibrosis. The possibilities of this technology are limited only by our imaginations, but the uses of this technology are limited by the morals and ethics that society accepts, and by the laws and regulations we enact to govern the technology.
Technology is really neutral. It isn't good or bad, and we people, we humans, give it its moral valence by how we use it. So while a couple might argue we'd rather have a baby that doesn't have cystic fibrosis than one that does, someone might say, but you can use that same technology to alter a situation that you shouldn't alter, like create a designer baby.
So, how do you determine which uses of this technology are good uses and which ones aren't? If you could choose traits for your child, would you? What if we could reverse the harmful effect humans have had on animals? What about a use of genetic engineering that already affects us all? Food production. Let's go shopping and explore more. Okay, let's pick up all the ingredients for that balanced breakfast everyone's always talking about. Whew, okay, let's eat. Before you dig in, can you tell which of these foods use genetic engineering during its production process? It might be the milk. The cow it came from could have been injected with VST, a genetically engineered hormone that boosts milk production. Or it could be the muffins. The grain used to make the flour could be a variety engineered to resist pests. The cereal could use those same grains to make the flakes. Or is it the margarine, which contains soy oil? More than half of the soybeans planted in the U.S. are varieties genetically engineered to tolerate herbicides. So, which one is it? You can't tell, because currently in the United States, the FDA doesn't require foods that use genetic engineering in their production to be labeled.
In 1992, the United States Federal Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, had made a ruling. It was pretty much a landmark ruling concerning GMOs, and basically on the labeling issue that they said, unless there is a significant difference, that there does not need to be any labeling.
The Food and Drug Administration's official policy on labeling reads this way. The agency is not aware of any information showing that foods derived by these new methods, meaning genetic engineering, differ from other foods in any meaningful or uniform way, or that as a class, foods developed by the new techniques present any different or greater safety concern than foods developed by traditional plant breeding. The method of development of a new plant variety, including the use of new techniques, including recombinant DNA techniques, would not usually be required to be disclosed in labeling for the food. But not everyone agrees that the foods are the same. An Iowa lawyer actually sued the FDA to get the foods off the shelves. He says the FDA ignored the findings of some of their own scientists.
It's clear that the predominant opinion among the FDA's, the Food and Drug Administration's own scientists that reviewed the issue was that genetic engineering is very different. And in fact, one of the officials at the FDA whose job it was to summarize the input from their scientists stated in a memo to the biotechnology coordinator, the processes of genetic engineering and traditional breeding are different, and according to the technical experts in the agency, they lead to different risks.
Those risks are what concern many people. They fear that growing genetically engineered crops could affect the environment and the plants and animals living there. Another common concern is that the foods will trigger allergic reactions in people or animals that eat them. Because there is no long-term testing required by the FDA for these foods, Labeling is seen by some as a way to track any effects of the foods. Some even see labeling as a basic consumer right.
It seems to me that labeling is a fundamental right that consumers should have. I mean, we after all live in a democracy and people should have access to information. And the only way that you can have adequate access to information in terms of how your food was produced is if you have some kind of label that says, you know, here's what happened. If someone does get ill and the food is not labeled, there's no way to track it. You know, if someone comes down with an allergy and the food hasn't been labeled and there's no way to know whether or not the food they ate was a genetically engineered variety or not, how do you track that? So then you really can't protect future consumers from that. And so I think labeling is essential.
If the regulatory agencies did agree to a labeling system for foods that use genetic engineering, how would that system function, and where would you draw the line?
What is it that you're saying about the product? Where do you stop? For example, if you label, how would you label beef or pork that is produced in part by feeding grain that was in part biotech grain? How do you do that? Because right now we don't have the mechanism for detecting the use of biotech products in the creation of livestock. We don't have the technology yet. So how would you label? What would you label?
It's not just an issue for politicians and food producers. Kid consumers have definite opinions about the food they eat and how it's made.
I'm in favor of labeling it genetically engineered food because the people have the right to know.
People would want to know what's on it and what's in it because they could be allergic to it.
I'm kind of for it and against it.
Companies already have their labels down and it'll cost them money.
I think that if you went and relabeled everything, it'd take forever.
Enough for me to see would be that it was genetically engineered in some way.
I agree too. I think something little would be enough.
We need to be really specific and do need to say what's in it and, you know, how it was produced.
I would put like GEF, genetically engineered foods, and then put like a number you could call where it's like a recorded message.
I just don't want it to be like a warning.
It wouldn't necessarily be a warning. It would just let you know that this is different from other foods.
It may scare some people into not buying that stuff if they have genetically engineered on the label.
It's not really that big of a deal because it's basically just about the same.
You should just go along with the nutritional facts is what I think, because they tell you like the fat, the calories, the saturated fat. Down there with all that and the vitamins and stuff, they could put this is genetically engineered. They have the right to know.
Right now, most of the traits being genetically engineered into foods are on the production side, meaning they benefit the farmer. The traits make the farmer more productive or more efficient or lower costs. But there are consumer traits being developed too, traits that directly benefit you, making your food more flavorful or more nutritious. So what kinds of traits would you like to see developed?
I would like to make a pig that could lay eggs, so you could have bacon and eggs anytime you want.
If I could bioengineer any animal, it would be a shrimp that has no shell, so you wouldn't have to waste all the time taking the shell off the shrimp.
If I could bioengineer something, I'd make bigger cows, bigger chickens, and bigger pigs so that could help with the hunger problems we have.
Those all sound like great ideas, just like golden rice does. It's a classic example of a consumer trait that also serves a greater good. Golden rice was developed by researchers Ingo Potrikis and Peter Beyer with a very specific goal in mind: to prevent vitamin A deficiency. Each year, that deficiency causes blindness in 500,000 people in developing countries. The researchers genetically engineered golden rice to provide increased levels of vitamin A. They inserted 3 different genes into the rice. 1 gene came from a daffodil, 2 came from other plants. The 3 genes, working together, reproduce the genetic pathway that controls the production of beta-carotene, which, when eaten, turns into vitamin A. By eating the genetically engineered rice, malnourished children and adults would get the vitamin A needed to prevent blindness. Sounds like a prime use of the technology, right? Critics of genetic engineering in food production don't agree.
What if it turns out that that golden rice is actually cancer-causing, and that in 10 to 15 years, all of those people who have bad eyesight because they are vitamin A deficient now have liver cancer. We haven't done them any favor. And until we've ruled out the potential that we're going to give them liver cancer or we're going to kill them by some poison, we're not doing them a favor and we shouldn't put it on the market.
Golden rice was developed to address a specific symptom within the larger problem of world hunger, a problem that experts agree will continue to grow. Right about now, the world population is about 6 billion. A study by the United Nations estimates we'll hit 9 billion by the year 2050. So how will we feed the world?
The world population, since I've started this sentence, has increased. The amount of land that's available to produce food is decreasing. What we have to do on this planet Earth is to produce more on each acre of land in order to meet the food needs of the 21st century. In my book, the only way we can do that without dramatically destroying land that is dedicated toward forests and rainforests and land that we love to look at is by applying biotechnology.
Biotech crops can be genetically engineered to deliver higher yields, to withstand drought, to grow in unusual conditions, or to pack more nutrition into every bite. All of those factors could be important with an exploding world population. But not everyone agrees that biotech is the best or only option to feed the world.
Even if we are wildly successful with producing tons of additional corn and soybeans or other commodities as a result of genetic engineering, it's not going to feed the world. I mean, we are producing more corn and soybeans right now than the world can possibly consume, and we've got 840 million people who are malnourished on this planet. Hunger is caused by a very complex set of factors. It has to do with everything from local ecologies and local social systems, and fundamentally it boils down to the fact that people are not entitled to food. It isn't that there isn't enough food available, but they're not entitled to it for all of these complex social and ecological factors. And just producing more stuff isn't going to change that.
So how will we meet the growing demand for food around the world?
If we genetically engineer food, we would have enough food to feed pretty much everybody in the world.
In Africa, the problem is not how much food they have, it's getting the food there.
There is a possibility that something could go wrong, but very slight possibility. But with taking that chance, we could probably later perfect it, and then if just by taking that chance, we could possibly solve, like you said, world hunger.
We need to spend money on setting it up over in there instead of bringing the food over to them, setting it up so that they can grow there.
Definitely food for thought. So now let's clear the table and get a little wild in the animal kingdom. Just like in Jurassic Park, genetic engineering really does make it possible to resurrect extinct animals. Imagine dinosaurs back on their feet. If, and it's a big if you can recover a usable sample of an extinct animal's DNA, through a form of genetic engineering called cloning, you can copy the DNA, insert it into a donor egg, implant it into a surrogate mother, and develop it like a normal embryo. This process played out in Iowa when a cow named Bessie gave birth to Noah. Not such a big deal unless you know Noah wasn't a cow at all, but a gaur, an endangered ox-like animal native to India and Burma. Noah died shortly after his birth from an infection, but the event brings up an important point. It's not just extinct species that could benefit from genetic engineering. Endangered species teetering on the edge of extinction could be pulled back from the brink. So why aren't scientists lining up to clone endangered or extinct species? Because of potential problems in the approach. The technology can only create copies of existing DNA, so all the offspring created would share the same DNA.
Every animal has weaknesses in their genes. If you are creating a smaller gene pool, you have more animals with that same weakness.
Another concern centers on habitats for these animals. Many are extinct or endangered because their habitats are disappearing. Would zoos become the only homes for genetically engineered animals?
What's going on is you've got some animals that have become extinct because of natural selection, which is a natural process, because of natural habitat changes. We know that the extinction rate has increased because of human intervention. That's a real issue, but trying to bring animals back and repopulate places that they have completely left extinct may be may be a little bit of a problem.
What do you think? Are the risks worth the benefits?
I think we should use, like, genetic engineering to bring back extinct species.
It depends on the type of animal. Like, I wouldn't want to bring back dinosaurs.
Yeah.
But maybe the dodo bird.
I'm kind of against genetic engineering for like any animal, like any kind of animal, whether it be endangered or extinct.
We're bringing them back to maybe face extinction again.
What if they found a way to keep them alive this time? That'd be cool.
Another issue is carrying capacity. If you make more animals, then how's the environment going to react?
Humans are destroying their habitat, and that's why it's like they're endangered. And so that's what we need to work on. I don't think we should use genetics.
I think they should work on plants first.
It'd be harder to bring back the plants and the animals.
Saving extinct or endangered species isn't the only use for genetic engineering in the animal kingdom. What could you come up with if you let your imagination run wild?
I want to cross myself with a bird. It doesn't matter what kind, I just want to be able to fly.
If I could genetically engineer something, I would make an elephant run really fast so that we could use them as a car and not have to hurt the environment, and they'd run really fast and take us wherever we want to go.
I would cross a puppy with whatever gene it is that a bacteria uses to live so long. So I could have a puppy that would live throughout the time I live so that it wouldn't be sad when he dies.
It's one thing to talk about cloning animals, but things get a little more serious when you start talking about cloning humans. Let's explore more. There is little doubt that genetic engineering is providing the medical field with the most powerful tools ever to research diseases and their causes, and to develop treatments and cures.
And I think that genetic technology really has the potential to impact the entire lifespan. It has the potential to impact babies and their genetic makeup. It has the impact to alter the course of diseases like diabetes. And it has the potential to alter things like Alzheimer's that might mean people are more productive in their later years. So genetic technologies really have the potential to impact our entire lifespan and change the entire lifespan.
With this power comes an awesome responsibility. These technologies can and will affect the future of the human race because of the potential applications of genetic engineering in human reproduction. The technology already exists to overcome infertility through techniques like in vitro fertilization. Scientists essentially create an embryo by joining the egg and sperm together outside the mother's body. That embryo can then be implanted in the mother's uterus. Genetic engineering could take that power one step further by altering the embryo that's created. An unborn child with a genetic defect, like the one that causes the fatal disease cystic fibrosis, could theoretically have that gene repaired. The child would then be free from a deadly disease. From fixing defects, it isn't a very big leap to choosing traits, creating a designer baby.
If you have the technology to eliminate cystic fibrosis, then you will also have technology to alter genes and give someone a baby with brown eyes or with particular sports ability or with particular intellect. You know, do you want to get a whole group of people like Albert Einstein or a whole group of Michael Jordans? And you could potentially do that. And would that be equally as good an idea as using the technology to have a baby not have cystic fibrosis?
Beyond the fixes, after the alterations, comes the most controversial of all the applications of genetic engineering: human cloning.
Cloning and genetic therapies will raise for us issues that are huge in terms of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, because we're now talking about messing with genetic makeup of people. You know, we can sort of talk about the tomato plants, you know, or the hybrid seed corn or whatever, because if some of those get thrown out in the process, it's no big deal, I mean, relatively speaking. But if we start creating embryos that aren't potential people, then what does that mean? And what does that say to us about the value of human life?
The US, Europe, and Japan all agreed not to pursue human cloning until early in 2001, when England passed a law allowing limited research into human cloning. As the technology races forward, our society struggles to keep up with the tough ethical questions that are raised. What would being a clone mean?
what does it mean to be a human being, and what is that made up of? And I think most people would suggest that individuals are their genetic makeup, whatever the influences of their environment have how they have impacted them, and then how they see themselves. How do they self-identify as who they are? So you could clone a Michael Jordan, and 20 years from now, when he's a grown person, he would have the genetic makeup of the Michael Jordan that we know. But because he was raised by a different family, the impact of his environment may mean that he hasn't even seen a basketball.
So, what do you think of cloning? If you could, would you clone yourself? Would you clone a parent, or a brother, or a sister, or your best friend?
Okay, I'm really against human cloning because I think, if you think of all the problems that there could be, things that could go wrong.
And we're having problems with animals being cloned. If we're having problems with that and we can't get that, good, then I don't think it'd work very well with humans.
Mm-hmm. And then you have to consider our population again.
And think of how boring it would be if we were, if we were all the same people, and we all thought the same, we all
There'd
looked
be
the
no
same.
arguments, there'd be no agreements.
Yourself. I think people would get tired of it, How would you like to walk out your door and see you all over the place? I mean, some people think that's really cool, but...
Hi, me. Where would we have those debates? And when would we have all those people protesting what they thought was wrong?
Yeah. It's just kind of playing like the role of a higher being, and it feels kind of wrong to do that because ethically, I don't know, it's just this feeling you get, and the feeling tells you that it's just wrong.
There's certainly some things that if it worked, it'd be neat. I mean, you wouldn't have to go to school every day. You'd send your clone to school.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have to clean your room, have your
clean your room.
But, if you got a messed up clone, then that's not going to work very well.
Yeah. And it's not like you can just throw them out the door and say, okay, I don't want you anymore.
There's people out there just discriminating by race, and I think that if they found out that you're a clone, that they would just, make fun of you.
Usually like, oh, well, that girl over there, she's a clone. I don't want to hang out with her. That guy over there, he's not a clone. He's cool. I like him.
So, whether you're talking about tweaking the genes in a tomato or cloning a human being, there are many viewpoints to be considered. Genetic engineering is already impacting our everyday lives, from the food we eat to the medicine we take. We've only begun to tap into the power of genetic engineering. But with that power comes responsibility.
These kinds of questions are new questions, and they come from new discovery. And while we respect and encourage discovery, the consequences of such discovery and the potential of such discovery needs us to really look deeply into the issue. And I think that's part of what we're doing now, is looking deeply into it, but finding along the way that there are lots of questions to be asked. And so while we respect the promise, we also question the promise.
I think it's really important that before we use it in society, we take a lot of time to debate, consider it, have regulation of it, have people informed about it, so that there's a very open and complete discussion so that everybody concerned can make good decisions about it before it moves out into society.
I think it's beyond our comprehension what's potentially available, what's potentially out there.
To explore more about this topic and others, go to this website. This program was funded by the Roy J. Carver Charitable Trust, the U.S. Department of Education Star Schools Program, and Iowa Public Television.